Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I'm here to take a look at the Chandra Planeswalker deck from Magic the Gathering's Core Set 2020. According to the back here, this is for Chandra Flame's Fury. No matter who she's fighting, Chandra definitely has a favorite tool, Fire. Blaze away your opponent's life total and swarm them with creatures before they can recover. You get a deck box, a 60 card deck that you can play tabletop or online, so it comes with a code for Arena. One 15 card booster pack, a strategy insert, and 2 reference cards. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. Alright, we have Chandra Flame's Fury here, a 6 mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker. For +1, Chandra Flame's Fury deals 2 damage to any target, that's basically shock. For -2, Chandra Flame's Fury deals 4 damage to target creature and 2 damage to that creature's controller, that's basically Chandra's Outrage. And -8, Chandra Flame's Fury deals 10 damage to target player and each creature that player controls, which is, I don't know if there's an exact card like that, but it's very close to Chandra's Ignition, I guess, minus the cards in hand element. But pretty cool card, very straightforward on what it's trying to do. Here is Chandra's deck box with some Chandra artwork on the front, fiery fists and all. We get 1 booster pack for Core Set 2020 instead of 2, but the MSRP for these decks is a little bit lower to offset the reduced number of booster packs inside. We have a hey before you play, and this is just going to tell you that play with this deck a bit before you add cards to it. We have a little bit of information on playing the deck. When she fights, Chandra becomes a walking inferno, dealing out fiery death in all directions. Bombard your opponent and their creatures with so much direct damage that they can never mount a real defense. Attack early and often, keep casting damaging spells, and burn both your opponent's plans and their life total to ash. It's very flavorfully written, but it's not a very good description of what exactly you're trying to do, because it doesn't tell you exactly what you're trying to do with any specific card in here, and you could almost apply this to any kind of aggressive deck. So, not the best description, not the most useful thing. Here are some terms to know, which include some mechanics and some general information. Some of this I actually like non-combat damage and any target, and so that's helpful. This has reminder text for flying on the cards themselves, so not as useful there. Chandra Flame's Fury. The name Chandra Nalaar makes most people think of the same thing. Fire, lots of fire. She's one of the most powerful pyromancers ever born, and she's not big on holding back in a fight. Subtlety may not be her specialty, but she has solved a surprising amount of problems by burning various things and monsters to the ground. Again, there's not a lot of information. It's already apparent from just her artwork what she's up to in terms of the fire thing, so I really wish that there was a little bit of story, just a tiny bit more about who she is and what she's interested in and so forth to make this more interesting. The back tells you what planeswalkers are and how they are used, and that's very helpful. There's no ads here either, which is a nice improvement from past planeswalker deck strategy inserts. Let's take a look at the deck itself. Alright, we have Drakuseth Maw of Flames as one of the rares. It is a 7/7 flying dragon, and whenever Drakuseth Maw of Flames attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. So this is definitely a bomb, but you have to be able to cast it at 7 mana. That's very expensive, so unless this deck has some ramp, it might just rot in your hands. Chandra's Flame Wave is Chandra's tutor, so this is the card that will search out Chandra Flame's Fury from your deck or graveyard and put it into your hand when you cast it. It also deals 2 damage to player and each creature that player controls, and so it could be a board wipe of a lot of small creatures as you cast it, as well as a way to deal damage to your opponent and maybe even finish them off. And so I really like this card as a tutor because it has a decent effect in addition to searching up this card, which could possibly just finish the game for you when you cast it the following turn. I will also note that this is an improvement from 2019's Planeswalker decks, and that this actually searches up the Planeswalker, whereas the previous one just let you look through the next cards and pick a card out of them. And I think that's a lot better because this says Planeswalker deck. You do want to actually play with the Planeswalkers, and so this is nice that it actually goes back to searching for the Planeswalkers. The other rare is the Shivan Dragon. The 5/5 dragon flying for 6 mana, and it has, for 1 mana, you can give it +1/+0 until end of turn. This is in the welcome decks for Core Set 2020, so this is actually kind of a waste of a rare slot. I really wish that they picked another rare from the set that could go in here that fits the theme, because you get this for free when you get a welcome deck, and that's probably what you got right before you bought this deck, and so not the coolest, even though this is an awesome card from Magic's heyday. Pyroclastic Elemental appears to be Chandra's uncommon. It is a 5-mana 5/4 elemental, and for 1 red Pyroclastic Elemental deals 1 damage to target player. Now this is a bit of mana sink, so this is just a fire elemental for the stats here, but if the game should get clogged up that you can't attack, this actually lets you spend your mana to deal damage to your opponent over time, and so I think this is a pretty decent card. I like that it doesn't require Chandra to be in play like previous uncommons to get its benefit. Wildfire Elemental appears to be Chandra's common. It is a 3/3 for 4, an elemental, and it says whenever an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, creatures you control gain +1/+0 until end of turn. So this is kind of like the uncommon that they put in here, Chandra's Spitfire, in that this gets stronger when an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, and then this kind of pumps your whole team when an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, and I think that works really well with the Scorch Spitters that we saw earlier, because they attack and do non-combat damage, as well as Chandra's rare, Chandra's Flame Wave, amongst probably other cards in here. And so I really like this card as a common. And then we have the reference cards. Here we have a little bit of information on combat damage, on attacking and blocking, Planeswalker loyalty, and the phases of the turn. I think that these are all really good in terms of reminders for early players on how certain things work in the game. Very good. I appreciate the improvement. This card here is less useful. The popular Magic formats, once you buy these decks, you're probably just going to be playing with this for a while, so this is not terribly useful. I kind of wish that this included the how to read a Magic card, you know, what all this stuff is on the face of the Magic card, and that would have been, I think, much more useful. And then you have the code for Chandra's deck on Arena. I've already redeemed this, and you'll probably see me playing some games with this in Standard. Alright, so that's the deck. I'm going to play with this a bit, and I'll be back with my thoughts. Alright, so I was able to play with this deck a bit, and here are my thoughts. The first thing to note is that part of this deck's major theme is doing non-combat damage to your opponent. That is, hitting your opponent with a spell or other damage effect that doesn't require you to attack them. These include the Shocks, Chandra's Outrage, the Ember Haulers, which you can throw at your opponent's face by sacrificing them, attacking with the Scorch Spitter, the Chandra's Flame Wave, and the activated ability of the Pyroclastic Elemental, as well as using Chandra's plus or minus abilities to deal damage to your opponent. All of those ways are triggering the non-combat damage effect, and the payoffs for that include the Chandra's Spitfire and Wildfire Elemental here. This gets stronger when you deal non-combat damage, and this makes all of your creatures stronger when you deal non-combat damage. And so that is one of the major themes of this deck, and you can see it all over the place here. Now, that said, it's a fun way to play the game. However, not all the cards really work with that theme, and there's just some stuff in this deck that doesn't really seem to serve that purpose. And the stuff includes 4 Pack Mastiffs, which are 2/2s that you can pump all of them for mana, and so there is a way to use your mana as a mana sink and then just make them hit harder, and that means that they can trade up and all, but they don't really play towards this idea of dealing non-combat damage, and otherwise they're just an attacking creature that has some level of fire breathing. Similarly, the Shivan Dragon, just like the Pack Mastiff, it's a huge creature, but it's not really doing what the rest of this deck is trying to do, and so it just feels like, hey, I'm just going to play a big giant 5/5 flyer that has fire breathing, which is not terribly exciting. It's really expensive, and it doesn't really feel like it's part of this game plan. Now this feels even worse because this is the free card that you can get in the welcome deck, and so it feels even more like just a throwaway card included in this deck, whereas most of the deck works towards the deck's plan. Dracoseth, even as a 7-mana creature, does actually work towards the plan, because you can, when you attack with Dracoseth, you can deal 4 damage to any target, which includes your opponent, and 3 damage each of up to 2 other targets, which can include your opponent. And so you can deal 4 or 3 to your opponent if you want to trigger some of these abilities. But I also feel like Dracoseth, even though it is a very powerful card, is an ill fit for this deck because it costs 7 mana. It's going to take forever to get to be able to play Dracoseth, and this deck doesn't have any capacity to ramp you towards playing Dracoseth early, and so a lot of times this card is just going to sit as a dead card in your hand. It's going to feel terrible most of the time when you have this card. So I think that this is a miss for the deck. I think that the deck should have had a different card that could be played earlier that actually plays better with the intended themes of the deck. Like, I would personally rather have another common Chandra's Outrage than a Drakuseth Maw Flames in this deck, which says a lot about how weak this card is towards this deck. But the rest of the deck does work fairly well together. The Infuriates are also just, I do not understand what their presence is. I would rather have some other effect that plays better with what this deck is trying to do, because giving +3/+2 for 1 mana, sure, that's a nice stat boost, but is it doing what this deck wants to do? The answer is going to be no almost all the time. Now, I also think that there should be another Scorch Spitter here, so you could probably switch one of these Infuriates for another Scorch Spitter and maybe some other effect that can be used for combat superiority. Instead of Infuriate, maybe like a card that gives First Strike or something like that, which lets your weaker creature, specifically Scorch Spitter, survive when it attacks. Now, that said, this is actually a decent starting point for the Cavalcade of Calamity deck, which that's a card from, I believe, Guilds of Ravnica, and it deals damage to your opponent when you attack with a 1-power creature, and so you have all the Spitfires and the Scorch Spitters which work towards that plan. The Spitfires become huge, and that's actually a lower tier constructed deck, and so this might not be a bad place to start with that. But that said, I think that this deck is one of the weaker of the Planeswalker decks, just because I think that it doesn't really hit the plan very well, and both of the rares are kind of a miss for what this deck is trying to do. But if it's something that's exciting to you, and you specifically like hurling damage at your opponent's face, this is still a decent deck, a great starting point for decks that are more burn oriented and then getting benefit off that burn. So if you play this deck, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.